Hello and welcome to Mad L Goes Racing, and today we're back in Automobilista 2 Beta and we're up to 0.8.4.0, and I'll just go through what's been changed, then I'll talk a little bit about some of the details on some of those things, and then we'll have a few laps around Brands Hatch in the Formula Trainer Advanced, I think. Right. Added Interlagos kart track 3 layouts. I'm sure that wasn't there earlier. I'll have to have a look. General disabled custom event date setting. I'll give you a bit more details on that in a minute. Fixed a bug that will cause a new track selection to retain the default date of the previous track. That's how you ended up going from one side of the world to the other, and it's suddenly going from the middle of summer to the middle of winter, and you couldn't move because the track temperature was -8 and covered in ice. Fixed multiplayer I'll try that again. Fixed multiplayer client rebroadcasting, which brackets could cause clients to be dropped from server. So hopefully that will mean you're less likely to have disconnects in multiplayer, which is always a good thing. UI and HUD, added pedal input and engine power torque data to telemetry screen. What I'll do is, because that's in the right hand corner down the bottom here, I will do a separate little snippet and I will insert it somewhere not too painful. In fact, I might do it right now. Yeah, now that I've just turned my camera off and I'm waving at the non-existent camera, just so you can see in the, if I just resume here, the lower right hand corner, you should now be able to see brake, clutch, accelerator. Now, there is also power and torque, and interestingly, if you listen closely and if you look at the numbers, you'll see it's producing 3 Newton meters of torque, which is not a lot. But if you now put your foot on the clutch, you know, the engine revs go up slightly. That's because there is friction in the gearbox, even though it's in neutral, and that is actually registered in the sim. And I hope you're impressed by that, because I'm impressed by that, and the fact that it's that detailed that you would actually hear the difference in engine note and tick over rate between having your clutch depressed and therefore disengaging the gearbox and engaged and engaging the gearbox input shaft only. So, well impressive. And with that, it's back to our normal programming, where you can see my ugly mug, but not the bit in the right corner here. And we're back. And next in the UI and HUD, because you might have forgotten where we were, fixed reported issues with VR/triple HUD customization. Brackets needs validation, will reset any previous edit in those types of display. So I'm not sure what the reported issues were. I'll have to go and check, but obviously some people are having a few HUD issues. I think 1 or 2 of them were off-center things in the telemetry, in a triple screen. I might be talking utter bollocks, but re-enabled HUD selection for options screen in session. I'm not quite sure what that is, but force feedback, added new default FFB profile with the following changes versus the old default. Remapped gain slider, more detail on a dedicated FFB post later. Well, that post hasn't appeared yet. When it does, hopefully it'll be somewhere where I can link to it, or I will copy it, or I will do something with it. And if it don't appear before I get this out, we'll take some educated guesses. But presumably gain is still gain, there's just something slightly more interesting about the way it does things. Improved low force boost formula, more detail on a dedicated FFB post later. See last item. A more detailed calculation of steering linkage ratios and how they influence force transferred to the rack. I'm not quite sure what was more detailed about it, but obviously they've done some extra calculations and decided they can make improvements. Overall small change in FFB output, whether that means just the size of it or we'll see. More accurate self-aligning torque and factors in residual MZ, camber inclination MZ, steer gyro MZ. Well, MZ is one of the forces, I believe it's the vertical one, in the forces on your steering rack, steering tyres, etc, etc. Go and Google MZ. Just don't be surprised if you learn a bit about two-strokes instead of steering. Anybody who knows anything about motorcycle racing in the 1950s will probably get that one, but if you don't, go and look it up. You'll also find out how the Degner curves at Suzuka got named the Degner curve, because it was only one to start with. I'm waffling again, aren't I? Physics and AI. Updated brake disc thickness, optimum temps, wear, failure, fade properties with variations depending on brake material, fixed brake failure issues from previous build, and improving brake feel on some cars. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute, a bit more. Minor adjustments to Formula Classic tyre tread, all gens, adjusted AI tyre rolling resistance in Formula V12, Formula 3 and Rocco. Minor AI performance update for Brands Hatch, Campo Grande, Donington, Goapur, Montreal, Alton Park, Schnettingen and Velocitar. Vehicles. Puma P052, updated missing LOD levels. Cockpit display, rim blur, windscreen. Cobra truck added new parameters for trucks to spawn in their pit slot rather than inside the garage, fixing bug in tracks where they wouldn't fit the garage. Yeah, if it makes it makes sense to make it so rather than spawn in the garage that they can't get out of, spawn them outside the garage and then they can just drive off. So perfectly sensible and simple fix rather than having to rebuild the garages, because obviously they wouldn't be accurate anymore. So adjusted MRX and Rocco collision mesh. I don't know whether this was just the general collision mesh or whether this was people complaining about multiplayer. Obviously if your collision mesh is inaccurate, you'll end up with things like wheels overlapping and funny things happening, so they do need to be the right shape to match the car. But I think I mentioned this before, you have to be a bit careful about not making them so they're too sort of wedgy, so they dive underneath other cars, and you want to make them a little bit flatter so that you sort of more nudge than ram or ramp, I should say. That probably sounded horrible in the mic, didn't it? A Parlour old stock fixed bodywork mapping distortion. I'm assuming there was something weird in the reflection on that then. The Gull Copper Classic added missing LOD levels. Formula V12 updated numbers 23 and 22, and I read them completely the other way around. Community skin. Actually says 22 and 23 here, and my brain went reverse those. Cobra Una completed livery updates for all cars in the series. So presumably they don't all look like they've been painted by somebody with no design style like me. Right, a little bit more on the scroll. Make the text bigger, lots more scrolling required. Going back to the force feedback. We have followed up with last week's updated force feedback, later reverted, by including an additional default profile you can opt in and out of from the FFB UI. So now there will be an old default and a new default from the FFB UI. People with existing game settings will remain with old until they switch to the new from the FFB UI. Reason for that being the gain, LFB and FX sliders work quite differently relative to the old profile. So we want to give people the chance to opt into the new one once they've understood how the sliders may need to be adjusted. As I said, waiting for a bit more detail on that. New features we discussed last week, along with some other adjustments, will be gradually phased into this optimal new profile, and it will remain optional at least for another build while we add the remaining features and everyone has had the chance to get up to speed with how best to set it up. Custom date option has been temporarily removed from season options. Now sessions will always run on default date for that track. With that, we also have addressed the bug that would cause a new track selection to retain the default date of the previous track, which could be particularly problematic when, for example, the user switched from a Brazilian track with a December summer default date to a European track, leading the latter to load with winter weather and temperatures with fairly big impact on physics that the user wouldn't have an obvious visual cue for. Next step will be to add a custom season option along with seasonal foliage, which besides the added visual variety will provide the visual cue for different temperatures. So they are going to go for the full 4 seasons. Snow, question mark, but definitely the full 4 seasons. But of course there's a lot of work involved in making up all the different shaders that are required for the different colours of the trees and whether or not you've got foliage on them, and also the different grass colours, and all of that needs to be sorted before, because obviously if you change the season and nothing visually changes, you're going to be going, why are my tyres not working? And until you actually look to see, oh my god, it's a bit chilly, if you had an obvious, like there's no leaves on the trees, visual cue, you'd be going, oh, there's no leaves on the trees, it's probably going to be a bit chilly, therefore I'm not surprised my tyres are not warming up. Much quicker. Option of customised date may be added at a later stage once we have more systems feeding correctly from such a specific setting. And lastly, brake properties. I don't know if it's got anything more than was in the previous one. I think it has. For all cars, including optimum temp ranges, where fade and failure properties all thoroughly revised according to the brake materials and specs of the car. These will address the brake failure issues from 0.8.3.2 and should hopefully provide more realistic wear and a bit more feel on some cars, although as usual further fine tuning will most likely still be required. An incremental update to this build should be deployed later today for both beta and release. So I don't know if that was on it. Has it been updated to 8.something? No. I just don't remember seeing, funnily enough, I don't remember seeing the added Interlagos kart tracks earlier, so maybe they snuck it in when I wasn't looking. I'll just go and have a look. Firstly at the options and controls and force feedback, and here we now have old default and went the wrong way, and new default. So now you have the option of the two. I've twiddled a bit. I haven't changed any numbers at all, but I will talk about that as we're driving around in a minute. What else was I going to look at? Oh yeah, race settings. Right, there's no dates here anymore, no seasons, so it should go to the default date for whichever track you're on. So if I have a look here, we're on the 11th of the 6th, and if we go to somewhere like Adelaide, we're now on the 5th of the 3rd, so it changes according to where you're going. Why it's 2017, 2018, I don't know. Let's get into the 2020s, people. Not that it makes any difference whatsoever, but obviously somewhere in the sort of June period. Doesn't matter which year, it's all going to be roughly the same. Right, what we're going to go for? Do I fancy some Formula Vintage? Not at the moment. Do I fancy some... pardon me. I think we will go for... Should I P2? Stock car? Yeah, let's try the stock car. Is it really a sequential? We'll soon find out. It's got two choices. Right. Ha! I think we'll hit the restart because I forgot I'd nudged me get lever into gear out. Damn. I'll just pause for a second because I'm going to go and get another drink before I hit the restart. Right, let's try that without having my H pattern in gear this time. Right, let's try that without the H pattern in gear and see if it works a bit better. Ooh. Braked a huge amount earlier than I thought they were going to. Let's try keeping off the grass, shall we? I don't know if there's slight difference in the FFB or what, but a lot more cars feel like they're rotating a bit more now, so... Or maybe I've just got too used to Sato Corsa and other things, FFB on what they're telling me, so... I just need to get used to this again. That's the one disadvantage between about jumping from one thing to another is you get used to the feeling of one thing and suddenly jump into something else and it feels terrible. And 10 minutes later it feels fine again after you've done a bit of driving. It does seem a little bit prone to rotating. That's a bit better. Yeah, I mean, it might just be the default setup in the cars I happen to have tried in the last 10 minutes or so ahead of driving before I jumped in to do this video. I just chose a load of cars that were just a bit prone to slide in the rear end a little bit. Or like I said, it might just be different sims, different force feedback, different feeling. It's too much driving these GT3 things with loads of electronics, and I'm forgotten how to drive a real car. Having said that, I was driving a FR90 in race room yesterday and that didn't feel too bad. That's better. Just need to be a little bit more gentle with it. And keep off the grass. That little drop off as you go over that crest. Get exactly the same feeling of the back end getting away from you. Driving in race room yesterday in a completely different car, which is always amazing. A little bit sketchy. I'm not sure which is more sketchy, the car or my driving at the moment. I think it's my driving. Get a wheel off the grass, it doesn't help. It almost feels like I'm sure the last time I drove this had a little less front end, it was a bit more prone to understeer, so maybe there's been a slight rebalancing of the car to be slightly more aggressive. Let's try with beta and or early access. You do end up with the cars changing, and it's not for the worse, it's just obviously I suddenly get in the car and it doesn't feel the same as it did last time I drove it, and that's a little bit aggressive. Mush. That mirror's really confusing due to the distortion on it. Well, that was 5 laps of me driving like an absolute wally, but at least I managed to do 5 laps. Yes, my best lap was pretty bad. So, right, I was about to have a race and I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I better go and check to see what's up with these Interlagos tracks. And I had a look and there ain't any. So I came out of the game, went back in, and it picked up another update. Always annoying when you're in the middle of trying to do something and it's an update whilst your game's running. So obviously it came out whilst I left the game running, but before after I'd checked online. So the Interlagos kart tracks are in. So let's have a so go around in the rental car. I'm not trying to make that fast lap. Interlagos, and we've got 3 layouts. What's the difference? Oh, there's a couple of extra chicanes in that one compared with that one. So that bypasses 2 chicanes, and that one's the same as the second one, but without that bit on the end. Which one should we go? We'll go for that one. We will have a couple of laps of trundling round. And I think we might pull up the telemetry and have a look to see if it really is a 28 horsepower. It probably won't actually make that when it's right up here, but I don't think we've got any instrumentation on this. I think it's just a stick your foot down and go job, isn't it? Lawnmowers away! Oh my god. These tyres are quite confusing. Which way is that going? You're trying driving around trying to look at up at a track map and going, which way am I going? And I think the answer to that is usually the wrong bloody way. And we get up to bit wide. Did I just go the wrong way? Like I said, slightly confusing track. Where are we on the track now? Well, at the moment we're producing all of 6 horsepower, so I'm not sure how accurate that 28 horsepower is, but I have to say, yeah, it does feel like about 5 horsepower, so whether once it clears its throat a bit it goes a bit more than it, I don't know. We're up to 7, 8. think I need a much longer straight to actually find out how much power this really does produce. Now, somehow I went that way and I should have gone around this way last time, I think. Let's put the track mount on again. I think it's definitely a case of it will take me a minute or two to actually work out where I'm going on this. And God forbid suddenly changes which track you're in. As kart tracks go, it's not too bad flow wise. I have no idea if this is actually the real track in the area or not, but so it's, but I'm getting lost. It's not too bad. Curves feel reasonable, not too big, not too small. A lot of tyres, not a lot of trees. I'm going to shout about trees. I'll get people taking the piss again. Not I don't mind people taking the piss. I think I was alright in thinking that was the I've stalled the car. If I do this, we can have a look. Yeah. If you want a bit of extra control over your camera, you can actually press Control K and then the WSAD keys and things like Q and E moves you left and right. So it's up, down, back, forward, left, right. And the keypad allows you to do some other weird stuff. If you press Control K, I think you have to press it twice to get that. So you can do, how many times do you have to press it? You eventually get to the point where they do some, oh there you go, some weird things as well. So was that the right one? I might be talking out my bum here. Oh, there you go. You can actually rotate the camera up and down and left and right, and the headless man. At least his feet work. And yes, you can actually drive around like this. Though I wouldn't recommend it, for obvious reasons, because you can't see where you're going, especially with no head. But like I said, just hit Control K a couple of times and you get all these extra things. Works in replays too, which is quite useful if you want to do some really weird arty angles and things, so you can sort of if I can manage to get, and the trouble is you can end up so you can't work out where the camera is if you're not careful. So if you want to drive along with your camera at that sort of angle in a replay, you can. I don't know. Go for the arty look. Oops, stalled the car again. Or should I say car t. So yeah, you can be weird with your cameras. Like I said, it works in replays too. So that's a look at the 0.8.4.0 with a bit extra. Like I said, main difference is going to be the FFB. Have a play with it, compare it, back to back it. what else was it? The brakes. A lot of the cars, you might find you've got slightly longer braking distances on them, and you have a bit more feel for where you're at or near the limit. And hopefully you shouldn't only do 3 laps and then you find your brakes are falling to pieces. So that'll do for now. From me, for now. Enjoy your racing, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.